Welcome back to News Talk. Our next guest represented Northern Virginia in the U.S. House for more than 30 years. Now he is traveling the globe, going places people rarely go, and he's teaching, an advocate, as he was in office, for human rights and religious freedom. Frank Wolf was elected the same night as Ronald Reagan back in 1980, retiring in 2014, and it is good to see you again. Welcome back.
Thank you, Bruce. Good to be with you.
It is fantastic to have you here. I scarcely know where to begin. A 30-plus year run in Congress. You were sort of the dean of the region's congressional delegation, involved in so many important national, international, and local issues like Metro. Now you are traveling the globe. You're going to some amazing places and basically fighting the fight and advocating for all the things that you talked about when you were in office.
Yes, I joined a group here in the Northern Virginia area called the 21st Century Wilberforce Organization. We work on the issue of religious freedom, and then I also accepted a position at Baylor University. They created what they call the Jerry and Susie Wilson Chair of Religious Freedom, and I fill the chair and go down to Baylor. And so really, it's great working on the issues that I care deeply about. As you know, I was co-chairman of the Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission, and I was the author of the International Religious Freedom Commission and different things like that. So we're just taking a lot of the work that I did in Congress and applying it to what's taking place in the world today.
When you travel the globe, you're not going to Paris and London and Dubai. You're going to the front lines of where people are suffering, where religious freedom is under attack, and where, in some cases, geographic and political boundaries are sort of disappearing.
We were in Iraq last year, the 21st Century Wilberforce Group, and we spent 5 days. We went up to the front lines with the Peshmerga. We looked out and saw ISIS. We went through the refugee camps, and what is taking place is genocide, and yet this administration will not call it genocide. There were 1.5 million Christians living in Iraq in 2003. Today there are about 250,000. 17 Christian families leave every day, and more biblical activity took place in Iraq than any other country of the world other than Israel. Abraham's from Iraq. It's Nasiriyah, but it's in the Bible. Daniel's buried in Iraq. Ezekiel's buried in Iraq. We were up in the front lines in Al-Qush. We went to Nahum's tomb. Rebecca's from Iraq. Esther's from Iraq. And yet the Christian community there are being destroyed. And they wonder, does anyone in the West care? They wonder, does the Obama administration care? The Obama administration will not call what is taking place in Iraq genocide. It is genocide against Christians. It is genocide against Yazidis. We met with a number of young Yazidi girls who have been kidnapped by ISIS. It is genocide against the Yazidis, and it's also genocide against Turkmen and some of the other minorities. But for some reason, the administration will not call it genocide. Now, I understand that next week maybe the Congress will bring a resolution up calling it a genocide, but they do not understand why we in the West will not advocate and be involved and help with regard to what's going on.
Is there a gap between what our response to ISIS or ISIL should be and what the political will of the nation is right now? And as a commander-in-chief, aren't you sort of always living in that in-between zone of what you would like to do in sort of the perfect world and what the people that you represent and who voted for you, and I don't mean that in a partisan sense, I mean when there's not much appetite for war and where you know, the outcomes of bombing and what have you, boots on the ground, incredibly controversial issue. I mean, is that part of why we're at this moment?
Well, I think the administration, the Obama administration, and quite frankly the Congress is failing on this issue of ISIS and the war on terror. We were in Nigeria a couple of weeks ago. Boko Haram has signed an agreement with ISIS. You read today's Washington Post, Al-Shabaab is active in Somalia. In Syria, Syria is pretty much gone. Remember the administration drew the line? The line went away. Paul, in the Bible...
You're talking about two different lines, so you're saying... when you say
you can't go to Damascus. You look at Iraq. Baghdad now has so many Iranians around Baghdad. Mosul, the second largest city, had 30,000 Christians. It's been taken over by ISIS. We see the stories. We see 21 Christians beheaded in Libya. And what did the administration say? The administration says 21 Egyptians beheaded. They wouldn't say 21 Christians beheaded. We see Al-Shabaab came into Kenya in Garissa at the university and asked, "Are you a Christian? If you were, you were killed." We need to deal with ISIS. And frankly, I don't think enough members are gone over there to see what's really taking place on the ground. We are not aiding the Peshmerga. The Peshmerga is the point of spear against ISIS. I looked at the weapons that Peshmerga have. They're old, archaic weapons. They're the kind of weapons you would put over your fireplace. And so we're not aiding them. And so, you know, we are facing the beginning of what I think, from a point of terrorism, really World War III. In Nigeria, Boko Haram is destabilizing the surrounding countries. Cameroon, Benin, Chad, Mali, Africa. We see Libya pretty much gone. Syria's gone. Iraq's gone. Afghan's not doing well. And what ISIS is doing, they are training young 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12-year-olds to be terrorists, and they will live on for a long time. So I think, quite frankly, we need a bipartisan come together to deal with the issue of ISIS and terrorism. And lastly, we see what they're coming to the West. We see what took place in France. We see what took place in San Bernardino.
Isn't this part of the reason we have the United Nations, to deal with global threats about which there can be
the United Nations failed in Cambodia. They failed to say it was genocide. The United Nations failed in Srebrenica. They failed to say it was genocide. Bodies were floating down the river in Rwanda. Reports were coming in from the Canadian General to our State Department and to the UN showing it was genocide. Bill Clinton felt so bad, if you recall, in his last year, he wanted to rewind and apologize. The UN has fundamentally failed. The UN failed in Darfur. I went to Darfur and came back and asked Kofi Annan to go to Darfur. Kofi Annan hadn't even gone to Darfur. The UN has failed. Unless the West begins to put together a plan, bringing our Sunni allies, bringing the Saudis involved, bringing the Jordanians involved, bringing the other nations involved, this thing is going to get much worse.
We have 90 seconds to a break that we have to hit. You have always traveled. You did it in office. You do it now. You go to dangerous places, and you go to like where the real action is. A lot of your colleagues, your former colleagues, kind of stay in the bubble, right? They're guided by whomever, and they don't get that same experience that I feel like you've always gotten and continue to get when you travel.
Well, I don't think you can know what's going on unless you go there and you spend the nights and you listen to the people and you get the rhythm of everything going on. And I think you have to see it, feel it, touch it, taste it, and listen to them in order to know what's really going on.
Much more of our conversation. We'll talk about this wild and woolly race for the White House, as well as we continue to talk to the man who represented Northern Virginia in the